For 3,000 years, the Vel'Shara Collective had known only dominance. Their crystalline warships cut through the void like surgical blades. Their commanders spoke in mathematics and absolute certainty. They were the architects of order in a chaotic galaxy, or so they believed. When the distress call came from the outer colonies, the Vel'Shara responded with their usual efficiency: plague, a biological weapon of unknown origin ravaging the settlements. The colonial governor, a being of logic and discipline, made the only rational choice: quarantine the affected sectors, seal them off, prevent spread, accept the losses. This was mathematics. This was survival. But something unexpected waited in those sealed zones. Something the Vel'Shara had never truly understood. The colony of New Haven consisted of just over 2,000 souls. Humans, mostly. A few Talcar traders. Some Senti workers. When the plague reached them, it struck like a hammer. Within 3 days, 100 were dead. Within a week, 200. The infection spread through the thin atmosphere processors, contaminating the water. Recyclers, turning the refuge into a tomb. The Vel'Shara calculated that 93% would be dead within a standard rotation. The remaining 7% would die within 3. The colony was, by any logical metric, already extinct. The quarantine held. But the humans did not accept this mathematics. Dr. Sarah Chen had been New Haven's chief medical officer for 4 years. She was not, by any measure, a warrior. Her credentials were in virology and emergency medicine. Her hands were steady, but her heart was breaking. The medical bay was overwhelmed. Makeshift isolation wards lined the corridors. Breathing apparatus hung like strange mechanical flowers from the ceiling. The sound. There was always a sound. The ragged breathing of the dying. The beeping of monitors searching for heartbeats that were growing fainter. "We're running out of ventilators," her assistant Marcus said. His voice was hollow. He'd lost his daughter 3 hours ago. Sarah didn't answer. She was looking at the viral samples on her screen. The pathogen was unlike anything in their databases. Aggressive, adaptive, mutating faster than any known virus. The Vel'Shara's own analysis, transmitted before the quarantine, was sealed, had concluded a vaccine was impossible. The mutation rate was too high. The genetic structure too complex. 93% dead in 1 rotation. The humans in New Haven believed it. But Sarah did not. In the administrative tower, Governor Keshal of the Vel'Shara received updates. Every 6 hours. The numbers were consistent. The plague was spreading exactly as predicted. The humans were dying exactly as predicted. The governor felt nothing but the cold satisfaction of accurate modeling. He did not, however, know what was happening in the lower levels of the colony. What Sarah Chen was doing. Sarah had made a decision that no logical being would make. She had decided to get infected. "Absolutely not," Marcus said, his voice sharp with the first real emotion Sarah had heard from him in days. "There's no other way," Sarah replied. She was preparing a syringe, her hands still steady, always steady. "The virus is intelligent. It evolves in response to treatment. Every antimicrobial we throw at it, it adapts. But if I can get infected, if I can let it evolve inside me, I can study the adaptation patterns in real time. Can see where it's vulnerable. You'll die. I'll probably die anyway, Marcus. We all will. But this way I might find something, a weakness, anything." She didn't tell him that she'd already calculated her own odds. The mortality rate was 78%. She was trying not to think about the 22% possibility that she wouldn't die at all, that she'd have to live with whatever came after. Sarah injected herself with a sample taken from one of the critical patients. She felt the needle slide in with a soft click. Then she waited. The fever came first, a creeping heat that spread through her body like fingers. Then the pain, deep bone-aching pain that made her want to scream, but she didn't, because screaming wouldn't help. She worked through it, her fingers flying across the genetic sequencer, running analysis after analysis, documenting every change in her own biology as the virus moved through her cells. 76 hours. She had, at most 76 hours before the infection would cascade into organ failure. Took her 52. On her monitoring screen, Sarah saw something that made her press her hand against her chest. Pattern. A vulnerability in the mutation sequence. The virus couldn't completely change one specific genetic marker without losing its replication ability. It was a flaw in its perfection, a choice between evolution and reproduction. Sarah had found a way to exploit it. She compiled the data with trembling hands, formulated a compound, prepared instructions that Marcus could follow even after she was gone. By hour 58, the fever was so intense that every breath felt like inhaling fire. She could feel her organs beginning to fail, the cascade she'd predicted. But the data was complete. "Get this to the synthesis lab," she told Marcus, her voice barely above a whisper. "Follow the steps exactly. When the first batch is ready, test it on the critical patients. It will work, Marcus. It has to work." Marcus held her hand as she lost consciousness, understanding for the first time what she'd done, that she'd walked knowingly into death to give others a chance at life. The Vel'Shara Collective received the data burst from New Haven with confusion. A medical request for synthesis equipment, for distribution protocols, for emergency vaccination protocols. But the colony was sealed. No one could send anything out. Yet the signal was genuine, timestamp verified. Governor Keshal ordered investigation. What they found was a human woman, Sarah Chen, unconscious in a medical bay, infected, dying. In her personal data logs, a complete viral analysis conducted from inside the infection itself. A methodology so unconventional, so impossible that the Vel'Shara analysis team demanded verification 3 times before accepting it. The compound she'd formulated was untested, dangerous, irrational, and yet the mathematics worked. They began synthesizing. Slowly at first, this was an alien virus after all, and Marcus, following Sarah's protocols exactly, administered it to the 5 most critical patients. Within 6 hours, the fevers began to break. Within 24 hours, the mortality rate had stopped accelerating. Within 48 hours, the plague's mutation rate had slowed to something manageable. Sarah Chen died in hour 71 of her infection. But she died knowing that her sacrifice was working, that the calculations she'd made had been right, that Marcus's voice, telling her the first patients were recovering, would be the last thing she heard. Governor Keshal of the Vel'Shara stood before the colony memorial, where Sarah's name was being added to the records. 1,983 humans had survived New Haven's plague. 17 had been Talkar. 14 had been Sinti. But 1 human woman had deliberately chosen to die so that the others might live. The Vel'Shara were a logical species. They calculated probabilities and optimized as the cold equation of loss and gain. But standing before Sarah's memorial, Governor Keshal found himself unable to calculate something that the data showed clearly. A woman who had volunteered to die had saved more lives than 1,000 rational decisions. A being who had chosen compassion over logic had discovered something that pure analysis had missed. A human, a young, brilliant, ordinary human, had found within herself a capacity for sacrifice that transcended every algorithm the Vel'Shara had ever written. Marcus came to stand beside the governor, holding a small object. Sarah's medical recorder. In it, her voice, recorded just hours before the end, speaking to Marcus. "Tell them." Sarah's voice on the recording was weak but clear. "Tell them. That's what humans do. We look at impossible odds and we find another way. We look at the math that says we should die and we choose to try anyway. We look at strangers and we sacrifice ourselves for them. Not because it's logical, because it's right. And for the first time, the galaxy understood what it truly meant to be human. Not strength, not intellect, not dominance or calculation, but the choice to matter, the choice to love, the choice to die so that others might live, in the face of mathematics that said it was pointless, in the face of logic that said it was foolish, in the face of a universe that said it was impossible. And yet, they did it anyway. If the story of human courage moved you, if Sarah's sacrifice echoes in your heart, subscribe for more tales from the stars, because humanity's greatest strength has never been our weapons or our ships. It's always been our ability to choose love in the face of the void. We'll see you in the next story.